I wanted to talk to you a bit about your early days and how you got to work on Team 17.
All right. So I'll say that a lot of things is that happen are good luck. Also because it was 2D and pixelated, and that was its charm. But people thought of it as a limitation. It was designed that way so that you could get as much land as possible with as least amount of pixels to depict the character as possible. We did this Nike commercial was so big that there was commercials for the commercial. Because the director of the commercial was Michael Bay.
Oh, what?
You're listening to Bought with Nelly.
Well, welcome to the Board with Nelly podcast. Cris Blyth, am I saying that last name right?
That's right. Blyth is right.
All right, beautiful. For people that might not know you, they definitely know a lot of your work, probably starting from the Team 17 days when you worked on Worms. You worked on countless commercials for brands like Disney, EA, Gatorade. You worked on many movies as well. Some of them, We Were Soldiers, Adaptation, Daredevil. I mean, it's quite the impressive resume. What is your title, I guess? What would I even call you?
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, because I've liked to do a lot of different things, and over time, you get to try lots of different things, if you're lucky. And there's a balance there of being good and doing a few things and going in one vector, or having a lot of different things and but the jack of all trades, master of none. I think I'm master of some things, but I do like to poke my finger into lots of other things. So yeah, I mean, I've done everything from directing, visual effects directing, editing, animation, 3D, 2D, visual effects supervisor, bottle washer, lots of different lots of different areas.
Those were in the earlier days, I hope. That's not your recent work.
No, it was this morning.
Oh, yeah. You're a Renaissance man. I think you talked about that in some of on your website. I think your dad was a Renaissance man.
Yeah, he really was.
Did he drive that? Did he create that kind of background?
I think so. Because he was an artist, but he was always designing stuff, and he was never sitting down doing nothing. He always drew or scribbled or was doing something, or he'd love to go into his back area. He had what looked like a greenhouse and just paint, or sometimes he plays trumpet or whatever. He would play on the keyboards too. He liked doing everything. He was always trying
creative outlets. Right, creative outlets. Yeah,
for sure. But he also really got me into computers. He brought home a computer from the college and said, "Here, look at this. This is the future. You need to learn all this." And I was
right.
Like, okay. And but then he was part of a team that was developing the use of computer graphics for use in the textile world. And he was really way back at the beginning. And I even got some of their cast-off machines quite a few years after they were, so I really got into graphics back then, but it was always, computer graphics wasn't just like the be all and end all for me. It was more like, well, it's just like a stage. You can do stuff here. You can make things. So it was far less about using the computer to do. I remember there was a lot of computer animation back then. And it was more about, well, how can you tell stories with this? So.
Very challenging. Do you think that Renaissance man is kind of a fading thing? Because it feels like everything is so niche nowadays.
Well, that's a good one, because what I've noticed now is when I came to Digital Domain, we were part of a group called the NT division. We were literally divisioned by our operating system because everyone else is on SGIs, and we were like, oh, those dirty NT boys, which we were. But we would try. We were using back then. We were using Lightwave, and it was a really great program for doing a lot of different things. But what it allowed us to do is we had a lot of really smart people around us too, and we were trying some new stuff. Now, what you would get, and that's what really led the commercial division to do some really, really good work at Digital Domain. And back then there was a lot of people on the features side that were singulars, like I do rigging, or I do this, I do that, and I'd sometimes go up to somebody and said, "Oh, can you render that? Just I need to see what it looks like." And he goes, "Oh, I only rig. I don't even know where the render button is. That type of thing. Now, fast forward to years later, I'm finding a lot of those same people are being kind of plucked and put into teams, younger teams, but with a more mature, artist driving it, that's had that kind of ethos of like knowing a bit about everything. Because now it's, I always call myself the anti-visual effects supervisor. It's about being efficient, and it's still about being cheap to a certain degree. And, you get people, if you know a lot of different things, you think, well, if I'm going to be tracking this, or I'm going to be comping this, or I'm going to be rotoing this, what would be the best way to do it? And it's that kind of mentality. You have to know that broad set, So for now, I'm always like, well, if you go here, this is fine. If you go here, that's going to be an extra $60,000. But if you like it here, that's only $5 and a bag of cookies.
Right.
This one's free. So it's more about how making the client understand that about all the different things, and you have to also take it on from how would you deal with it yourself. So the more you know how to do, the better you are.
The better you are. That's what I'm thinking too. I'm still hanging on to the Renaissance, man. I love media side of this thing, but I also have an engineering background. I have a electrical engineering degree. So
same here. I've done a lot about. I started in electronics engineering.
Really nice.
An RF, yeah.
It's almost like collecting like Pokemon cards. I just want to collect all these little degrees.
Yeah.
I just want to get them all. Little dojo badges. Yeah.
You have to have lots of letters after your name.
I want to have a Rolodex of just like.
Yeah, exactly. This is me. No, I think it's important. I think the more, I do a lot of music, and I remember there was a time, a long time ago at Digital Domain, when the client was saying there was something I'm holding something now. The client was saying something was hitting something. And they said, it doesn't look hard enough. It looks rubbery. I said, it just needs sound. And they're like, no. So we were trying again and again and again to try and make this thing look more harder and more, percussive. And so back then, the Flame suites could only take 2 channels of audio. And I said, why do we just bring in a sound effect? And they said, we can't do that. And I said, all right, can you give me the audio? And they went, no. I said, give me the audio. And he took the audio. I went home at lunchtime, I have a studio at home, and I added a boink right at the right time, brought it back. It was subtle, but it was in there. Clients came back from lunch and they're like, okay, how's it going? And then we played it with that, and they went, oh, it's fixed. It's great. It's much better. So by knowing more areas,
yeah, of course.
I think it helps lots of different things, and that's helped me on my commercials too. Sometimes if I'm directing, I directed a bunch of commercials out in Kenya, and sometimes I'd be sitting and the script would be beside me and would be hunched over the monitor and my walkie-talkie and stuff. And if I got an idea of the music in my head of like, oh, this would, I could see the way the commercial's going. Sometimes, and this is great because it was my own production company and we could do these kind of things. I would do the music. I wouldn't tell the client I was doing the music. I would always say it's my guy in Norway, which I do have a guy in Norway, and he has supplied music to me, but I use him I say that it's him all the time, even though it's me sometimes.
But you're the guy in Norway.
I'm the guy in Norway. Well, it's when they want to call him, and I'm like, no, he doesn't want to talk.
He only speaks Norwegian. I know Norwegian.
Yeah,
don't worry about it.
He doesn't speak, let me talk to him, so that worked out there. So I did quite a few commercials out there where we need audio, music or audio stuff. And there was many times that you'd get to run the gamut. You'd do the color correction, you do the editing, you come up with the idea, you'd grade it, you do the visual effect. It's not very efficient, but it's great fun for getting that out of your system and still keeping everything fresh. Yeah,
I've noticed when I'm talking to a lot of developers, and I've talked to one of them that worked on Command and Conquer, the Red Alert games. I don't know if you've played those strategy games. They also use Lightwave. But basically, when I'm talking to these people, it's interesting because they were such a small team. So everyone was involved in a little bit of everything. Yeah. And they all picked up a very a very solid base of knowledge in, let's say, video game design, from animations to coding to whatever. And then a lot of them went on to become producers, directors, designers, leads of teams, because they knew every single dimension of this project, let's say. So that there's such value in there, maybe, that people don't see nowadays with everything being so niche and literally everything.
There is also, right? I'm in Blender most of the times now. And I have a love-hate relationship with Blender because it's so awesome that there's all this new stuff in there, and that's great. But at the same time, there's some stuff that's just, it's too young, or it's too, they need to somehow go back in history and see. Sometimes you don't go back in history. All you're doing is redoing the same mistakes. But some of the stuff is 5. It's like if I'm moving something, I'm generally going to move. Hang on, I'm going to use my Unreal mouse mat.
People for
going to move like that.
For anyone
You're
listening to the
gonna move that
podcast,
away,
there's
right?
a mouse on screen and he's moving it in flat space.
But most people are moving the mouse moving a thing that way, and then the alternate is up and down. But with Blender, it's like you get to move it, and when you're rotating, if you don't set it right, you can rotate it from where the camera is. It's like that's rare. You know, you wouldn't generally you want to move things around. So that's one of the things that just bugged me about Blender. It's like there's 15 weird keystrokes to get to things, and sometimes you can jump. Sometimes I use Oliver Hotz's copy paste program that I'll just copy, paste it into Lightwave, maybe do something there, and then bounce back.
Okay, Blender. I didn't even know what Blender was. So free open source 3D.
Blender's amazing.
Graphic software. Okay.
Blender's unbelievable. I say it's going to actually. I say this. Ultimately, Blender will win. Blender will win.
Anyone that's going down that route, take note. This is some valuable information.
Yeah, it's great. I think there's other programs that are just fantastic, and I think Maya feels like the Facebook of 3D. It's like for old people or something. I don't know. and I'm not young right now, but whenever I'm using Maya, I'm like, oh God, it's so crumbly feeling. Okay, let's get in. You know. But with Blender, you've got these young, fresh-faced people trying 50 million things, and some of them are good ideas. Some of them are unrealized, or they're a rehash of an idea that's 20 steps that can be won in a mature piece of software. And that's one of the things that you know, that's where Maya's weight really comes in, is that it's much better at that kind of stuff. Now Houdini's totally like taken off. There is that 10 years ago, it was seen for only like boffins or real coders that would be able to get in there and utilize it, but now it's totally changed its ways. So yeah, it's a changing world, but you got to know all of it. You got
to move with the times, as they say. We can talk about software probably for an hour and a half, and I'm not even well versed in it. I can still talk about it, but I wanted to talk to you a bit about your early days and how you got to work on Team 17.
All right.
Yeah, how did that come about?
So I'll say that a lot of things is that happen are good luck. All right, it's experience and good timing and good. It's that Venn diagram that they always do. But I do think of it as good luck. I was working as an electronics engineer, and I was in the Philippines. As it happened, I'd been in China, and then I was back in Hong Kong, and then I got flown out to the Philippines. I was dotting around all over the place, and I knew that I was. This is back when the Amiga was a big thing, and I knew that I was in the place where the Amiga was made. So I'll try and keep this story short, but it's kind of a cool story. Is that Marcus Dyson was the editor of Amiga Format, and he was very charismatic, and the editorial piece that everyone read. It was really, he brought a lot of like character to the whole thing, and I reached out to him. Because I said, hey, I'm in the Philippines. I can go to the factory and maybe do a little piece about it. And I just kind of threw it out there. And then he got back to me, and then he said, hey, I got your voicemail. I left a voicemail. Let me blah, 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 blah. All right. And I'm like, okay, this sounds like I could do this. And I kind of organized for me to actually go to the place and everything. But then I noticed that Marcus was talking a lot about Team 17 in Yorkshire in general, and about all the new upcoming stuff that Team 17 were doing, which I thought was interesting, but I didn't understand it at that point. And then I called Future Publishing to talk to him again, and they said, I'm sorry, he no longer works here.
What? That wasn't public information.
It wasn't public information. And I went, oh, do you know where he is? And they went, actually, no, I don't know where he is.
Oh my God.
Oh,
yeah.
And so I literally hung up the phone. And I was like, I bet he's gone to Team 17. I called up Team 17 and I blindly said, hi, is Marcus Dyson there? And he went,
like you're asking for an old friend.
The receptionist, Sylvia, said, yeah, he's just walking through the door right now. And so he picked up me and went, hello? And he goes, I went, hi, it's Cris Blyth from the Philippines. He goes, how did you find? No one knows I'm gone.
Right.
No one even knows I left like a cowboy, fly by night kind of deal. And you found me? And he goes, oh, you have to, hey, I'm having a party. Can you come down? And I'm like, I'll be back in a week or so. When is it? And he goes and told me the dates. And that was that. And then I went down for a party and I met all the Team 17 people. And I just bought an Amiga 4000 at the time. And I'd had Amiga 500. I was doing 3D stuff on that. And then I was doing an Amiga 4000. And then when I went to the party, I met a guy called John Allardyce, who was a great animator, and he does great previews still to this day. Actually, he does it in Lightwave, funnily enough.
Wow.
It's a long story.
Okay.
Yeah. But anyway, it's just really fast for that kind of stuff. But anyhow, I met with him and we got on, and then it turned out he was living in Edinburgh at the time and then moving down to Team 17. So long story cut short, they pulled me in years later. They got me into Team 17 for this small project called Worms. And I was brought in to help John Allardyce finish off the FMV animations. And that went really, really well, you know, and then John went on to do something different. I went on to work on Worms 2, and I did all the intro animations for that as well. And then Project X and a bunch of other stuff. It was a really exciting time for a very young company that were doing some great things and going against the trend, because everything was going 3D at that point and we were sticking on 2D. So it was an incredible time.
All right. Do you ever think what would happen if you didn't make that phone call? What would you be doing today?
Well, actually, one of the other things that I was asking Marcus was, at that time, PCs were coming up, and you could get all the magazine adverts. You can get this, or an Amiga 4000 for more money, and it seemed to come with less things. And I actually asked him, what should I do? And he goes, Amiga for sure. He said a PC is better, cheaper, and it will beat the Amiga. And he said he had his own predictions for where things were going to go. But he was like, get an Amiga. And so literally, when I was in the Philippines, I ordered my Amiga. And the weird thing is, it arrived the day that I arrived back in the UK. Like I just crashed. I came in early and sleep, and then there was a knock at the door and somebody came with a package, and I'd been sleeping for literally a few hours and arrived that same day. So yeah, so it was actually Marcus that made me get my Amiga 4000, which I, in the end, took to Team 17 and used my own Amiga to work on all the Worm stuff. I don't know how it was done, but back in the day, you brought your own machine, and then you'd maybe get a machine later. But and then in the end, I brought that machine to the States, and then it sat in my shed for a long time until I gave it to Perifractic, the retro recipes guy.
Yeah, I saw the video. Of course, that was really cool. You guys sat down for 30 minutes, talked about the old days, and
yeah, we've got more things we're going to be doing now too. Because I've built a synthesizer, and so I've built that, and we're going to be doing something together with some music things. So
awesome. I was curious when you said like you went to the party. Did they know what your background was? Like, did you have any idea what Worms was? Did you see like potential in the game? Did they describe you the game? Did you see footage of the game?
We didn't know the game then. At that point, it wasn't for Worms. I went to that party just to meet everyone, and it was just a bunch of people, and it was like all the faces that I'd seen in the magazine I was now meeting. And, everyone was, being merry and happy. And it was just, but it was really funny because I thought, that's all these people. And then, so people were saying to me, what do you do? And I was like, I'm an electronics engineer and RF engineer. And they're like, what's that? And they said, so hang on, you don't use, and I said, well, I do 3D, but I mean, I don't do this type of 3D,
sure.
And I don't do this type of stuff. And they went, you should come and work for us. And I got on well with people, but I felt completely unqualified. It's like, that's those people. But then John actually asked me to make a few demos and make some things, and I love modeling. And so they sent them in. They were like, these are really good. And then there was, I did a bunch. I did a dune buggy, I did a rifle. I did a couple of things for Project X, just taking their graphics and then making them into 3D. They didn't use them for anything, but they saw that I was good at that. And then they tried for 2 or 3 times to get me in, but the money wasn't right until Worms came along. And on the same day that I was actually about to extend my contract, which I didn't want to do with this company that was doing electronics for, it was a great company because it allowed me to travel the world. But it wasn't the most inspiring work for me. And on the day that they said, will you sign this? I was literally about to sign, and I got a thing on my pager. We have screens on the pager. And I said, let me get that. And I saw it was coming up from Martin Brown, Team 17. And I said, let me get that. And my guy that I was about to sign the paper thought it was a client of mine. Like, oh, isn't he good? He's being a good, responsive boy. And I picked up the phone and went, hey, hi, how are you doing? And I was in the same room. And he goes, Martin went, we're on. How quickly can you get here? I'm like, Monday. And it was Friday.
Right.
And I was in London. And I was handing in my company car, basically, about to do that. But I didn't do it at that point. But I went, yeah, I can be there Monday. Sure. All right. And I literally hung up the phone and said, I'm sorry, I can't sign this. And he goes, wait, is that a client? And I'm like, nope.
Right.
And I said, I'm not signing it. And he goes, I can't believe because it was really good money.
Oh,
and
yeah,
it was
I bet.
great for travel. But I realized this is a thing I got to do. And it was a huge leap of faith because, at the time I was coming from, I'm working for an electronics company. My dad was always like, my son travels the world, and that kind of stuff. And so when I told him, I'm going to work for a games company, he goes, you mean for children? And I was like, no, it does video games, and explain. He was like, huh, okay, I don't get it, but I get your gut. You all right?
They're paying you, whatever. It's great.
Yeah, yeah, but it was just it was very different.
Of course.
The company I was working for had a whole bunch of perks and everything, and whenever you were working abroad, you got paid more and all this kind of stuff. It was bananas. But then going to Team 17 was just like the best decision, and it was with a lot of young and amazing people. I got to meet people that I'd known about for a long time, and then working with them, and then building things was really great. And I really amped up my animation and comedy timing stuff, which I knew I really liked to do, and that came out really fast. Like getting we're just me and John would pour over like Tom and Jerry stuff and Roadrunner stuff and get ideas for different things, and we worked really well bouncing ideas off each other. And actually, John gave me. I never used to drink coffee.
Oh,
and John,
yeah.
we were working one night. He went here, and I was like, "Oh, I don't drink coffee." And he goes, "You do now."
Yeah,
and then,
right.
and he says, "You'll need it." And then, it was then 5 o'clock in the morning, and we're still working, and the sun's coming up.
Yeah,
and his
the
wife
early
calls
days
and
of
like,
video game design. It was always
it
like
was just
that.
crazy. We were. I mean, I remember I got this ability. If I'm going on set, my thing will go off at like 5:30 or 6. Whatever I set it to, I will wake up
Before.
like a minute before.
Yeah,
I've got this great, and that came from setting renders off and seeing it's going to take 20 minutes, and then sleeping on the floor and going, I need to wake up in 20 minutes because the computer didn't make any sound that it was finished.
Right.
So I'd have to just wake up. All right, and I did that on Worms so much, and on Project X2 so much that I got really good at waking myself up and taking power naps. And so if I'm anywhere, I can fall asleep in about 8 seconds and then wake up after a power nap refreshed. And so
that's a valuable skill set. That's a valuable skill to have.
Well, that was Team 17 that because of the lack of being able to do stuff, the computers were, we were dealing with. So my computer had 16 megabytes of memory, megabytes, not gigabytes, megabytes.
Right.
And that was my A4000. And then 4 of them were taken for talking to the Raptor, which was our NT-based workstation that we'd send frames to. So it was an Amiga that would actually control a RISC processor box with RISC processors, and it actually ran on NT, which is really weird. And it was called the Raptor. Before that, it was called the Screamer. And then, and Team 17 were one of the first companies to get it, and it could tear through frames. It was like a little rendering engine farm box thing. And and so we'd only ever have 12 megabytes to work with.
That's crazy.
That was it.
That's a different time. That's a different world.
Make the scene work in 12 megabytes.
One of the challenges I think I remember from the Worms days looking at the footage was how these worms were very small and not as detailed. Were you involved in the process of turning them into like more animated and more lively characters, cute, whatever you want to call it?
Well, as we went forward from Worms 1, there was a real drive to keep the simplicity and the immediacy of the game. Because when you're playing with teams, and it's a very UK thing to take teams to take turns to play. And we have bowling in the States, and people take turns doing that, and then it's a very social kind of drinking type in between thing. But in video games, people want to go click, 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 I'm playing. right? And so Worms has always been a difficult one for the American audience, and also because it was 2D and pixelated, and that was its charm. But people thought of it as a limitation. It was designed that way so that you could get as much land as possible with as least amount of pixels to depict the character as possible. And that was Andy Davidson. And I think he struck a great balance with the size of the characters versus the zooming in and out and the whole thing. I think it was absolutely amazing. But when we went to Worms 2, we wanted to keep that. And the guy's name was Carl. And there was a bunch of other people that were working on Worms 2. But he pushed for the Oxford Animation Animo. I can't remember. Anyway, it was an expensive vector-based animation system, which then, you know, you'd animate them as vectors. Oxford something or other. It was popular at the time, but then scale it down and then rasterize it for different resolutions and different platforms. And that way we could really eke out, you know, the subtle movements would be real pixel flickers that would work in our benefit. But it was so when we went to Worms 2, it was really keeping that scale of them maybe a bit bigger and be a bit more visible, but more zooming in and out. But they worked tirelessly to find that balance of let's not just go 3D because everything else is going 3D. In fact, the first time Worms went 3D, it was not.
Many years later.
It was many years later.
Yeah.
And excuse me, and I don't think it was the best implementation. Now they've got a different implementation, and now, you know, they've favored going back between 3D and 2D and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, what's the benefit of going 3D? Does it need to be 3D? If this is a side-on thing and it's about these distances and things like that, it's like it's got to. The core of it was a 2D game. How you manipulate that and make it still be cell shaded. Where I was involved was, okay, these things are looking very cell shaded, like little inked in cartoons. How can you take that and do that in 3D, but then maintain that cell shaded look? And Lightwave had a couple of plugins and its own built-in system for doing cell shading, and it straight off the bat it worked great. And so I redesigned. I didn't design the first character, and even the actual worm on the first animated ones was that John built that. But it was plagued. We had animation and also modeling issues because we couldn't. Even like the armpit, we had these problems with trying to rebuild something and with time. So when I went to doing the next one, I built it from scratch, and it was based on the new worm that's in Worms 2, the updated one. And then you know, I built a much more robust animation system of IK and the eyebrows and the eyes and all that kind of stuff. So you could really just concentrate on animating.
How does that work? If you don't mind me interrupting you, how does it work when that kind of stuff happens? Do you have an artist first that hand draws like what a worm would look like, and then you have someone that digitally creates it, and then you have someone that creates a model for it in 3D? How does the process work?
Well, in that process, it being a young company, it was probably different because we had lots of different people pitching in different ideas, different artists. But I think the artist that was working the Animo system. Oh, is it Animo? Did I just say
Animo? Maybe you.
I don't know.
Yeah. I'll look it up in the edit.
Oxford Animation System, something. I think it was him that actually designed it. But I'd have to look back at that. So the guy that was actually animating it was the guy that was building it. As they were building it in 2D, it was allowing them to animate it anyway. It's the same system for building it. So I think they designed, but I'm thinking I'm missing out a vital step of who actually did the main graphics at that part.
Because I'm thinking that's an iconic design, right? There's some things that are very iconic.
Oh, yeah.
The original Worms is a very iconic design, just like any like Disney property to me, in my mind at least.
Sure, but if you look at the art boxes and also the intro animations for the original Worms and Worms 2, you will see Rory Little had his implementation. He's lovely. Rory Little, I think he's still at Team 17. And there was also Rory McLeish. And Rory McLeish was very
Rory
big.
Little Rory, yeah.
And Big Rory and Little Rory is fantastic. So bless him. He's such a lovely, they're both lovely gentlemen. But he had his own style of doing stuff. Rory Little came from traditional art, and then we changed him over to digital art. And he took over a lot of the techniques that really favored painting in Photoshop back then. He did a great job. But then there was another guy called Craig, who was a 3D animator, and one of his intro animations made it in at some point, and his was a totally different style.
Really?
And then they also sent it to the States for the US, and then they did their own branding and totally different as well. So we had the UK artwork, which had 3 different styles internally, and then the American artwork. And so after then, I think they really started to, right, no, we're going to have a unified thing because this is crazy. So now it's totally unified and totally, they're it's a 20 years later company. They're very, very organized and structured. But at the beginning, there was a lot of like, who's got the best ideas and the loudest voice at that point. But they saw sense, and I think the design that's in the game is one style, and then I tried to emulate that as much closely as I could for the FMV sequences. In that, but it was never a clean path, I think. But we're all so young.
Sure, of course. What do you think made Worms such a special and successful franchise that to this day is thriving?
Yeah.
Maybe a tougher question because it requires a little bit of thought in the past.
I think it's a great question, and I think it comes down to different cultures as well. As I've said, in the States, it was popular in colleges.
Yeah.
People in a dorm room. But outside of that, there's a lot less awareness of it. Whereas in the UK, you've got a lot more, there's a pub mentality that's a lot more present than here, for sure, especially in Los Angeles anyway. And there's a lot less going over to people's houses to play a turn-based game. Nowadays people are playing online against each other. And
yeah,
there's a lot
that's
more
a culture
camaraderie.
thing too, right?
Yeah, and my son, he hangs out in lobbies or in a game just talking to his friends. They're not even playing the game.
Yeah, they're just on Discord.
There's a community thing there.
Yeah.
But I think the idea of when you're waiting and you're dying to have another go and you know that you could just get crushed and you're that anticipation, like, oh God. And then when that person misses, that like, okay, now I can go get them. It's the same as like, when you're talking about bowling, when you go bowling and you're in the game and you're playing and you do it and everything's great. But then if you're walking out of the bowling alley and you see an empty thing and you're like, I'm just going to take this.
Yeah.
You do it. Where does it go? The gutter. It always like you take that chance and you muff it, right? And so in the same way, I think that's the same way with Worms, is that when you're playing, you have to be on your game, and if you celebrate too much, you can mess up on the next one. And I think it's a very human thing. I think that keeping calm and the excitement of waiting is actually, I think, something that really works. That excitement of like, oh crap, I'm going to get hammered here and not being able to do anything about it, and then having that chance of revenge is I think that's a human thing less than the funny little voices thing. And even the landscape, I think it comes down to there's a core thing in there about of fighting back and also being hopeless. It's like when you're watching a horror movie and you know it's coming and you can't do anything about it. At that time when you're just like, oh my God, here it comes, I'm that's, I think that's really the core of that. And also just playing with multiple people on one computer back then was just a lot of fun,
Yeah, Worms holds this very special place amongst games that are so fun socially. We're talking about games like Mario Party, Mario Kart. Like, there's some games that are just so much better when you're all together in a room and enjoying the same mistakes, enjoying the same amazing, long-range missile from the other island or whatever it is.
We would play Worms on Friday nights. We'd actually have people playing.
Yeah, at the company.
We'd play their own game. It was good.
That's a common theme against with all the developers I've talked to with fantastic games.
That's good.
Yeah, at Red Alert, Age of Empires, Heroes, Might and Magic, every single developer has all said the exact same thing. That's
great. I didn't know that. That's
They've
really
all
good.
said
That's
we
good.
would play the game together once or twice, or sometimes they play it daily. So because you didn't have a tester team back then, you were the tester team.
Actually, no, we had a tester team.
Oh, did you?
We had a team. Yeah, we did. We had a whole testing department.
Wow. Okay, well that's a new one.
Yep.
A lot of these places didn't. They were their own testers.
All of those guys, Kevin, Cartlow, and a bunch of the others, they're now all producers. They're like starting and organizing and running the games there, and they're all still there. And I remember them when they were young wee boys, little whippersnappers.
Right. Do you think Worms is? It's a little tougher to innovate for a game that kind of has the secret sauce, if you know what I mean. Why do you go from game to game and not mess with what's made this game so special, the core mechanics, but also have a reason for someone to buy a new edition or something like that? Obviously, the jump to 2D, 3D is a very special rare jump. But from year to year, does it become harder to innovate for a game like that?
Oh, I think so. And I think for a while, they were. I remember even when I was there, we did a pinball games with a Worms theme on it. And I remember, even though I really like doing the graphics for that and the reasoning behind all the way that it looked, my brain's kind of like, it's a wee bit.
Yeah, right.
And I know that they did go through some hard times of when they went to 3D and they lost the gameplay to a certain degree, and then they've gone back to 2D. And I think they've tried some other things over the years. But you're right. I think it's really difficult. So I think Team 17 have, as anyone would, they've tried certain things that haven't worked.
Yes.
And now I think they've managed to come back with other games that might not have been developed at Team 17, but in collaboration and published by Team 17, like the cooking one.
Yeah, Overcooked, right?
Overcooked.
Yeah.
And even the Escapists, all of that was it relies on teamwork and timing. And I think Overcooked for me is a really great example of, you need that interactive timing, and it's interactive and it's kind of 3D and it's fun looking and all that kind of stuff. And I think that the lessons that they've learned on Worms have allowed them to understand when they see something else that's close to it to go, yes, this, and then help them, So I think they've been really, in the last 2 or 3 years, they've been really smart about how they've subtly changed the game. And, to be honest, I'm probably less aware of all the changes that they've made now for the newest versions of the game.
They've gone into a 2D, kind of like a battle royale, but it's
right.
I would say this is probably the biggest jump in the franchise's history, because they've gone to, it's no longer turn-based. It's all like, you play with 64.
That's right.
What do you think about that? Yeah. What do you? I'm curious.
And I think that you can get into, I think it goes down definitely a different avenue, and it might work. It might need to go in this avenue for the way that games are nowadays. I think how hard Team 17 was bucking against the industry back then, it made them look in some ways like, oh my goodness, those guys over there, they're odd, but man, they know how to make a playable game. And so it was the history of the playable games that they'd made that when Worms came along, it's like, there's got to be something behind this. But when Team 17 went down the 3D route, I don't know if it was accepted as well. And then, because why? So now in the same way, I think Team 17 is reacting, and it might be in a very smart way, to the way that people do want real time. But something that I think my son finds out when playing games like Rust and stuff like that is that you'll get people that are just in there just to kill other people, not about letting people build or do whatever, and I think that sometimes you can take any of these battle royale style platforms, and have bad people like making the game crap, making
chaos.
The game unplayable for other people.
Yes.
And I think that's one of the things that the 2D thing and the turn-based thing really stops that from happening, because you can't just go again, you have to take turns. So I'd be very interested to see where it goes. From what I've heard, it seems like people are liking it. I haven't had a chance. I've been rather busy.
No worries. But, I think it's been received okay by its fans. It's interesting. I think it's going to be one of those games that's going to take maybe 1 or 2 more installations before they reach, let's say their best version of the game. I think this is a good.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see if esports is, because esports is massive now. Esports was not a thing when you were making video games, and how, I'm curious how to see how they're going to implement that, and if they're going to go that route even.
Yeah, it's interesting. Esports is obviously a big deal now, and you're right. Going towards a multiplayer, real-time battle royale type of gameplay, what it does make me, it's great, but I think it kind of leads us down a path of battle royale for everything. In the same way that when the internet came out, it's like, you can do anything. Think of all the millions of things that we can use the internet for. Cats, Instagram, TikTok. It's come down to a narrow field of view. And I even remember when there was this game creator kit years ago that came out, and it's like, what kind of game do you want to build? A 2D killing game, a 2D climbing game, or a tennis game? Like, what? That's where they had coalesced back in those days of those types of games. In the same way, I think you know, if you look at the other games that Team 17 have launched, some of them are totally not battle royale, and they're fantastic looking, amazing, wondrous. Like, how the hell did they make that look so beautiful? And it's not even a game anymore; it's just a wandering adventure. And it's, I like that. I really like that Team 17 are still doing that, which really shows that they're really thinking about it in the right way, and not known as being a developer of just X style games, you know. And I really admire them for that.
That's a really tough thing to do, not even as a gaming company, but as any entity. Once you get typecast, or once you become this one thing, you're so limited in the scope of what you can create after that, because that's all people want. They want this. Yeah. And it's like, at some point, the person that makes those things is like going to lose their mind, because they don't have the thing they were putting most of their creativity into has been lost in the sense of it's, you know, how repetitive it is.
Yeah. And that's why you get with any platform. If you look at Vine, and you look at TikTok, remember Vine?
Yeah, I do.
And you look at TikTok, and now you look at the Insta stories, and you look at anything else. They're just different platforms. And then when TikTok came along, it wasn't even for what this was for. It's turned into something else than what the creators even wanted it to be. It was for lip syncing for videos. Right? Now, in the same way with Fortnite became a victim of its own success, and then battle building happened. And then battle building wasn't battle building. It was, you build buildings to defend yourself so you can get ready and health and all that, and then go back out. Then it turns into this huge flying up into the sky doing battle building. And I watched my son, you know, he actually, when he was in Kenya, he played for the biggest esports team in Kenya called the Watchmen.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
Yeah, he was a young lad doing that. Anyhow, but I'd see them battle building. And you can imagine that the guys that created battle building, created building inside Fortnite. It's like, what, we've made a monster. We've made something that we didn't know the community was going to go and do something totally different with. Now, do they go down that road, or do they limit it and stop it? Like, at what point do you say, okay, this is something else, we should go for it, or this is something that we stop? You know, and I think that it's it's a real case-based case. You know, you have to really look at it and see where your community is going, because at that point, battle building was totally a thing, and you know, then they start swapping out their weapons and making some really bad choices on that. And then my point to all of this is, then everyone could just jump onto another platform, because it's another battle royale thing. And this time it's got this. It's kind of like Halo, and it's got Portal. They got them both in together. Yeah, let's just do this, and then they'll do that, and then they'll try and modify that, and then it's like, yeah, we're done with this already, and they jump onto the next thing. So in the same way, there'll be the next TikTok, which wasn't supposed to be a TikTok. Let's call it Flim Flam, but it's for sharing pictures of remote controls, right? But it turns out into something totally different in the end. And I think apps have their time to a certain degree. And I think the balance is finding something that has longevity. And I think that's what Team 17 have maybe, as they were going down the road with Worms, they realized what they had. And it's very, as you say, it's very unique. But it is interesting now that, yeah, you have to sometimes go with the flow and see where it goes.
There was something I actually wanted to ask you about Team 17 in terms of other projects, because I remember you talked about this. I can't remember which video it was, to be perfectly honest, but some other ideas that came to Team 17's door, but they didn't quite accept them. I think one of them was an Amazon-like bookstore, online bookstore.
Yeah, I watched that from the periphery. Marcus Dyson, same guy. His room of team of people he called the Big Room. And so they tried out this idea, and it was Marcus Dyson and I believe Tim Smith, the writer Tim Smith, who pioneered that, I think, along with, at that time, Marcus's wife Amanda, I believe. I really can't remember, but basically they looked at the data for actually people doing secure transactions and credit card transactions, and they looked at who was doing that, and they looked at who's got the most, and they looked at the ages of the people that were actually doing it, and they were surprised that there were people in their 30s to 50s that were actually the first adopters of secure purchases, and those people had available money to burn.
Yeah, of course.
And that age group, what do they like? Books. So And I don't know if this is exactly how they thought it all out, but this is what it seems to be. And I remember some of it happening at the time, although it is 150 years ago. And so they said, we're going to try books. We're going to try selling books online. We're a software company. We're like, books? Was that with 2 O's or 3? Right. And so, but they started selling, and then the warehouse started to get filled up with books coming in and out. And I remember at the time, Mick Robinson, who was a lovely guy, he really wanted to support the games business. And he said, this isn't really our strong suite. And he goes, well, but look, it's working. And I don't know what happened with all of that, but although the big room selling the books was doing really, really well, they stepped away from it. And I don't know what happened with all the negotiations of why it didn't continue. But yeah.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. It's kind of interesting that we were just talking about like trying to step outside potentially your little domain.
Yeah.
And sometimes you strike gold and sometimes you hit nothing, right? I mean, this was like one of those rare opportunities that you look back and you think, wow, like could they actually have created the new Amazon?
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't think of that at all. That's really good. It's incredible, because I think Amazon was starting in the 90s. I have to look it up. This was maybe 1993, 94.
1994 was when Amazon was founded.
Wow. Okay. So maybe Marcus was taking it from Amazon in the US, because it wasn't in the UK.
Right. There was another one that you talked about, was a Tomb Raider type game or something like that.
Oh yeah.
These are fascinating to me. I want to hear more.
Yeah. Now, again, a lot of water has gone under the bridge. There was a lot of decisions made. There was a lot of young, hot-headed people. We're all grown-ups now.
Of course.
And I'm still in contact with, I think, everyone that was on that team, and which is great. I'm in contact with everyone. A lot of people at Team 17 too. So that was a game that again, remember, they're all young. They were trying things out, and they were trying to develop a multi-level game and build 3D environments for that. And back then, they weren't really doing any kind of like modular building in 3D. They were just building a huge set and then loading it in chunks. And they were trying to get the game engine working. They were trying to get the dynamics working. They're trying to get all that. And I remember back then the feeling we shot all this live action stuff as cutscenes in between to really fill in the story. It was the early La Femme Nikita story. And that was all John Allardyce. He wrote this thing, he filmed it all. It was great. Really, really good fun. And I helped out in that. And my wife of the time actually was in it.
Wow.
Nice. Yeah. There's so much. Oh my God.
Family business.
Well, it's an interesting story. There's more stuff going to that. But
yeah, I
think they had trouble with the game. They had trouble with the game engine. And then I remember when the idea, they did start off with a guy, and then they wanted a girl. And at the time, I remember one of the quotes was, well, you'd want to be a man and guns. You don't want to be a girl running around, do you? And we were like, what?
Right.
Are you, what? Don't you? Huh? And so, all of the stuff that Lara Croft had was in Allegiance in that kind of way, the kind of sexiness and the whole thing.
Allegiance, that's what it was. Yeah, that's the game.
Yeah, it was Allegiance, yeah. And I think the story was really good. I think John did a great encapsulation of all that. And actually, even I think my wife of back then, she did a great job in the acting of the cutscenes. She was really good. But then the game got dropped, and I think it was there wasn't enough levels. There wasn't enough resources to do a game of that size. It wasn't thought out right. It's like, let's go running. It's like, oh, I don't really have the right shoes. Let's just keep on going. Oh, I don't have any water. It was kind of, they planned as much as they could plan, but they didn't realize the things that were going to come later on once the game got to a certain size that they would need. And so, and I think that's my running analogy would work, is that they started off with the bottle of water and the running shoes and all that, but then it's like, oh, there's an uphill thing and there's a storm coming and it's hailstones. Oh, I didn't bring an umbrella. It's like not knowing the things that you might need to bring with you to finish something was part of the learning experience. And there was a lot of really good artwork and thought and level design put in there. I thought it was really good fun. But there was simply a lot of other competition for games coming out that that's why even the first person shooter was a departure for Team 17. It's like, let's stick to our core.
Yeah.
Let's stick to gameplay first. Let's stick to simplicity. And that's what I think also maybe didn't help in its culling. But I think there was a lot of other factors. There was tons going on. There was mistakes that were being made. There was more money that needed to be put in. It needed more money, perhaps. I'm not sure exactly. There was a lot of things going on, but some things were there, and that wasn't the only victim. There was other victims too.
Do you remember what your biggest, let's say, one of those victims might be, like a big regret that you still kind of remember to this day that you wish you could have done?
Oh wow, not really.
I mean, in the time you're obviously working on a fantastic game, and that worked out awesome. But do you ever look back and like, man, we should have picked up that project, or we should have done this?
There was other projects that I wasn't involved in that were kind of amazing, but I didn't have regret on those personally. I remember I had instant buyer's regret, as it were, when I started with Digital Domain. So when Digital Domain hired me, and they were basically going to take all my stuff in a shipping container and move it over there, which was fantastic.
Well, let's actually introduce Digital Domain. Digital Domain is a special effects company by James Cameron.
Visual effects company started by Stan Winston and this guy, he's some Canadian guy. Jim Cameron, that's it. Yeah.
Jim Cameron.
And he started the company along with Scott Ross, who came from managing ILM, to build like a new style of visual effects. And they had all the brightest minds there. And Digital Domain's been going for, a long time now. I was lucky enough to be I got in as employee number 212.
Whoa.
So they're not many thousands past that. So I'm kind of like seen as one of the early people.
But did you know what they were working on before that? Before you got...
They just finished Titanic.
Oh, wow.
And they lost a lot of people because they literally people like, I can't do this. I'm going to go and do something else. Right?
Really?
They lost some people after that. And then also there was people needed a break. But the commercials division was coming along. Now, this is what would always happen with Digital Domain was they have the commercials division would do well, and the features division would be at that point somehow quiet. And then it would swap around. The features would be doing amazing, and commercials would be quiet. This yin and yang was like, you could almost observe it as a weather pattern. It was incredible how it would be like that. And sometimes we'd get commercials because a movie had done well, like, oh, Digital Domain did this. And then sometimes we'd do something in a commercial and it'd get noticed, and and then it'd get put into a movie, and it'd be going back and forward. And so yeah, when Digital Domain called, when I went across and visit Digital Domain, and it was, again, I had blind luck with me on that one. It was just fantastic. But when you're saying about regret before,
yeah.
When I was leaving Team 17, and I remember it was a rainy day, and I was leaving, and I was actually leaving the offices for the last time. I left from the office to the airport. I didn't go anywhere else. And my friend Oscar took me to the airport, and who now lives in the States. As I was leaving, I saw everyone's arms waving out the window as I was driving away. And I was like, oh God, I'm leaving my family. What have I done? And I felt awful at that moment. It's like, oh goodness, what am I doing? And I had this moment of, what am I doing? But then as soon as I got in the plane and I landed and everything, I thought, all right, this is what I'm doing.
It's perfectly natural, I think, to when you're making such a big life decision or move. That,
yeah, I do wonder if I'd stayed at Team 17. I do sometimes think of that. Like, I wonder what that would have been like. It would have been a great life. It would have been very different.
Right. You'd probably be like a director or some higher up position at Team 17 working on your own game, maybe even.
Yeah. But I wouldn't have started my own companies and moved to Africa and then moved back to Africa from Africa.
There's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot we got to unpackage there. You can't just Dave Chappelle and say you moved to Africa. So after you were done with your time at Team 17, you got hired by Digital. What was it? Sorry, what was the name of the company?
Digital Domain.
Digital Domain, and then you started working on feature films, or was it commercials? A little bit of both.
I started in features, and the first thing I worked on was a feature called Supernova.
Yes.
Which was not that good of a film.
Not highly regarded to this day, let's just say.
they were changing story and painting and cast as they were coming up with a story, and then changing that afterwards.
It was doomed from the get-go. Yeah.
It was like studio coming up with a cool idea, and the original idea was great, and then they totally just, what on earth did they do to that? And we were really trying to pick up the pieces whilst that was happening. We did some great work on it, but there was also like, I remember somebody coming up and going, right, see this woman? She needs to be African American and not white.
Yeah.
But we filmed her. That's her flying,
right?
And she's naked.
Okay.
That's a white lady there. So there was those kind of things of changing stuff, and so I started on that, and I was like, oh my god, features is like, it felt nuts. That was my first one in, and it was like, this is crazy. Then I worked on the next thing after that. Worked on a Nike commercial for
Wait, was your effects in the movie was good, but the movie itself sucked? So to you, it's still kind of okay. Obviously, you'd like to be attached to a good piece of work, but you were okay in the sense that your part in that movie, your visual effects were really well made.
Oh yeah, we did. Hang on, I just need to look something up.
This is the equivalent in basketball to losing, but you had a good game. You dropped 30 points, like.
Yeah, no, we did good work. No doubt about it. And I was happy with the work that we did. And it was my first time. So I was learning tracking. I was learning the way that they have the routine of having walkthroughs all day and having timed things to show your work. And then when they say, yeah, we like this, let's get this to film and let's see it in the screening room. So they take your shot, put it to film, and then the next day you'd see it in the screening room.
That's
through
crazy.
Film on the wall.
So it must be surreal. Almost.
It was weird.
Yeah.
It was weird. It's like, can't you just play video things? Like,
right.
No.
Nope.
Like, do you think video will be able to go to 2K resolution? And then, of course, years later it did. Right. But back then, film was the only way. So yeah, when I worked on this Nike commercial, we did commercial. This Nike commercial was so big that there was commercials for the commercial. Because the director of the commercial was Michael Bay.
Oh, what?
Yeah. It was crazy.
That's insane.
So they had these ill-timed, not completely thought out in terms of how they would be received. Incredible art, incredible fun. And we worked with this guy, the comedian, Fallon?
Jimmy Fallon?
Harlan Williams. Is that right?
Williams.
You have to look it up. And anyway, he was in this commercial, and he was called Head because there was a robot head that was detached from he lost his body.
Right.
And that was because the bike that he's running on had these shoes, and they're just keeping on going, and he's a robot. Anyhow, there was a series of commercials about these types of weird things happening with Nike. And I remember when one of the shots was a prosthetic head rolling down, or a CG head being matched with Harlan Williams going onto a prosthetic head, and then the choice was: do we just do the 3D one or do we do the 2D one? And we nailed it. It looked great, but Michael Bay had already said, and this is 1997 Michael Bay, 1998 whatever. He said, I hate CG.
Oh,
I hate CG.
Come on. Come on, Bay.
And so when we showed him that,
Michael,
he went, which one's CG? And I was like,
oh, yep.
I said, which one do you like? And he goes, that one. And I went, and I wasn't me. It was a group of people, and it was the CG supervisor at the time. And he was like, oh, well, that one's CG. And he's like, still hate it. Walked away. Right?
Wow.
And then, but I was like, oh. And then when they spent like $5 million on like one set with this curiosity shop that was sprawling and incredible, and neon signs. It was unbelievable. Maybe not $5 million one set. It was $5 million for art direction.
Regardless,
whatever it was still a lot of money, right? And I remember going, wow, commercials. There was so much money in commercials. And then another commercial came along, and then the NT division was doing a lot more commercials. And so I was like, commercials is great because you get to try new things. And if it doesn't work, it's like, imagine if you build a machine to run a marathon and halfway through the marathon machine starts breaking. It's like, I can still run and then get through the finish line. So
Right.
you would try things out and they would either work or not work or be able to be patched or fixed. And you'd learn so much more along the way. And so that's why I liked the commercials. And also, I think there was a lot of division back then from features and commercials. If you worked on features, you worked on features. And you worked in commercials, you were commercials.
Right.
Guy. You know, and they were literally in two different buildings, you know? And so, you know, all of these people I'm friends with now, but back then it was silly. We're all like idiots. And we're like, oh, you're dirty little commercial boy.
Right. You know, I would think it would be the opposite. When you say you have freedom for commercials, I would think it would be opposite because you have to deal with brands and protecting their images and all these other corporate people getting in your, you know, work. But
people would come to Digital Domain because we were trying new stuff.
I
you know,
see.
we did the very first full CG car commercial with a CG environment.
That's crazy.
You know, and it'd never been done before. And man, did we get some hate. As the local unions are calling up going, where was this shot in California? And we're like, no, it wasn't shot. And they're like, where was it shot? I'm like, it wasn't shot. And they're like, but this was a union job, right? And we're like, no.
Yeah, when you start messing with people's
like,
money.
Well, we're gonna have some pretty pissed off people want to know where this was filmed, and they're not getting, you know, you're not getting rep. And we're like, oh, this was fully CG, and they were like, what?
Well, we got a bigger problem now. Yeah, that's a much bigger problem.
Like,
yeah.
oh, yeah, we've got bigger problems.
Next thing you know, your studio's gonna get burned down the next day.
Yeah, no. So I remember there was some film people that were pissed, and we were doing some. So we spent as much work on doing the art direction for the environments and getting those right, and then doing the car, you know. But so we were allowed to try all sorts of things which are standard nowadays. One of the things we did, and it might be I can't remember anyone doing it before me, that we took even back then we didn't know it was HDRs. We had this different format back then, but we took a reflection with the sun, and if you're filming a car, you want the sun to be there backlighting it, and then it looks great, and then you got the cold side on this side, but then the camera comes around to the front, and then they're like, oh, we see the sun here, we want it back there. So I literally put two suns in, so it looked great from there, and then it would be cold in the middle, and then it looked great from there, and then we're like, oh, that's great. So we managed to do some stuff, but what we would always do is we'd add camera bumps and jiggles and add bits flying in front of the frame, and we'd just add them in, and it would add to the realism.
Yeah, right.
I remember one of the guys going, I left some fingerprints on the car. And I was like, dude, bigger problems, but good.
Yeah,
you know, we'd put stuff in that would actually really, really small things. And there was a young bunch of guys that came from Station X. There was Richard Wardlow, Andy Lesniak, Rusty Apolito, and many. There was a bunch of those guys that came that were at Digital Domain, and then after Digital Domain Titanic, they left and made their own thing called Station X. And they did some crazy work, and people kind of look at them going, "Wow, that's just like a bunch of the guys that used to be the NT guys. They all left." And I was actually brought in to fill in some of that void.
Oh, nice,
you know?
Right.
But then we started seeing some of the stuff. You realize that a lot of that legacy and a lot of the people were still there. So yeah, we added in stuff that would, you know. I remember there was one of the guys, Manny. He's well known now because he does these videos that look like UFO videos or planes turning upside down videos, but it's actually not. And he has to tell people, no, it's CG. And he did this trick where he had this F-15 or F-14 plane going. We had a lamppost just swoosh inside, and then the focus went. He just defocused a little bit.
Yeah.
And that, I think it was the first time that I'd seen a CG camera defocus.
Fake defocus. Wow.
So then when we were, you know, a lot of the times when we had guys and we were learning about CG and the weight of a real camera, getting a weight on your, you know, if you learned with that and then actually seeing, oh, that's why the camera reacts. That's why the camera has inertia, because you've got a big shoulder mounted camera. Adding all those things in, I think we did a lot of that in the commercials division, which really helped add a lot to our way of like, why does that look good? You know,
it's crazy to think that CG or special effects in general has gone so far now that like in Scorsese movies, you have like a weird digitally animated De Niro, and it's funny that Michael Bay was so against this. Maybe he was part of the union, the union you were talking about, because now all his movies are like 95% CGI and all that.
Well, yeah, he went. I mean, he's a very opinionated but will change his mind. He's kind of a scientist. He'll be very opinionated about something, but if different data comes along that shows, oh, this is different, then he's like, oh, that data that I just said before is invalid. I'm now going in this direction. So when CG actually got to a stage where it was reliably good and fast and shiny and would give him everything he wants, he's totally on board, of course. And I think that's a good scientific approach to things. David Fincher is exactly the same. He would always try new stuff all the time. And he'd be sometimes vehemently opinionated about certain things. And then when you show him a different way, he'd say, yep, that's right. And he'd leave all the emotion of it behind. Sometimes the annoyance, and Jim Cameron is kind of like that too. He would be very passionate about something, but then if something is a better way over there, he will drop all that emotion and almost every memory of having arguments with people and go, no, we're just doing this now. And everyone's like, I'm still arguing about the last thing,
Yeah, you almost have to be that kind of guy to be at that kind of at the top of the food chain.
Well, that's right. And that's why that kind of scientific, when new data arrives, we change our mind if we need to. That kind of approach to technology and filmmaking is a more healthy.
It's an engineering approach almost.
Yeah, because something else comes up and it's better. And so I remember way back in the day when we were doing these, we could front projection from the camera. So we would sometimes match up a scene and then take a picture from a camera and then spew it from the camera with the right angle and then match it back in, right? And go, all right, boom, we've now matched that. So we can now move around inside the room with no CG needed.
Wow.
We didn't realize that those techniques were going to be called something else later on.
Yeah.
And like, oh, so this whole virtual environment thing that everyone's doing, the idea and thoughts and even stuff written down, it goes way back to the late 90s. It's just that the technology is now finally caught up. And it does bug me somewhat when people come along and say, we invented this. It's like, no, the technology has now just come to a place that we can do it. But the idea of having an LED wall and something driving the camera, that's 20 years old. It's ancient. The manipulation and the way of it being done with Unreal and all that, it's different implementation, but the idea of
the fundamental concept.
Yeah, they imagine if you can light a character with LEDs and you move the camera around and the LEDs change. That's 20 years old.
I wanted to ask you also about some of the other works you've done. I yesterday actually watched Adaptation, which for the first 30 minutes was like, what the hell is? I couldn't comprehend what was happening here, and then by the end, I just started clapping because I'm like, that's brilliant. Like I finally. So what were your specific role in that movie?
So I had I was real lucky on that one.
That seems like to be the theme of this podcast. I'm going to call this, I was really lucky.
Yeah. I even joining Digital Domain, I was really lucky, which is, I'll tell you about if you like. But so I just come back from holiday and I was totally energized and ready. And everyone else had been working on another thing and then got thrown onto this last minute project. Adaptation didn't have much money, but we wanted to help the director and we liked being associated with those types of things. We did that a lot back then. And so I just done a job with this program called Teragen. It's a program I'm still involved with today. Teragen is a landscape generation and atmosphere and clouds, everything tool. It's great. It's a planet builder, actually. You can go from the ground, looking at a pebble, to space, and it will look exactly accurate. And it's good enough for NASA because they use it in their calculations. Wow. So it's an amazing program. And I'd been using that on a different thing earlier. And so we said, we need this thing to erode and then to grow and water to come up. And they're like, how the hell are we going to do it? Oh my God, we've not got much time to get this done. And I was like, we'll use Teragen. And they were like, the Terra what? I said, oh, watch this. So we had been using Teragen before. And then at that time, actually, it's a long story, but the programmer of Teragen was in the UK, and we actually got him to come across and work at Digital Domain. And then Teragen was used internally at Digital Domain for a long time. And like, if you watch the movie Stealth, that's so much as Teragen. It's ridiculous. Yeah. So it's all these landscapes and dust and everything like that. So anyway, we're using Teragen. I must say, no, Teragen was a known thing and it was already at Digital Domain and we were using it a lot when Adaptation came around. But I'd just come off of using it for a job for basically the same kind of shot. So we said, let's do it this way. I had access to Matt, the programmer, and I already had the digital elevation data of that area that they said, we want to make it look like this place. I said, where's this place? And they said, oh, it's in Utah or something like that. Or I can't remember where it was, Colorado. And I got the digital elevation files, downloaded them, and brought them in and recreated that area. And then we started shading it, and then we started again, and then we did this whole thing of having the water animate up and down. And then we did lava, and there was Nikos that was involved, and Jody Campanaro she was the compositor, and so Nikos worked on the lava flow outside of Terrigen, and Jody comped it together, and then even the whole clouds thing, animating all that, we got everything to work really well, really quickly. And she did a great job compositing it. Nikos did a great job in integrating the lava, and then I did the water rising and all the terrain stuff. And it was one of those ones that I came back. We knocked that shot out. The whole thing was got to be 2 weeks less. And from
and it's the start of the movie. It's one of the pivotal parts of the movie. It's like the beginning, right? It's one of the opening shots. The beginning.
Now they had other people working on different parts.
Sure.
The LA thing. I think John worked on that.
The outro, the last scene, the flowers, right? Was that probably?
Yeah, and there was other. So there was a whole bunch of other compositors. So all these different segments were like a combination of stock footage brought in with nature time lapse stuff, and then all sliced together with some Terrigen. And there was another Terrigen shot that I didn't work on, the other one, and the one with the caveman, and then it was really putting it together, but we didn't have much time on that. But so everything came together just really, really well. It's like running through a supermarket and grabbing things,
everything,
and it's all exactly what you want. Yeah. You're out in 5 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you have any communication with like Spike Jonze and him telling you, what he'd like in these kinds of scenes, or
he was super nice, very simple. He would come in and say, "Yeah, I really like that. Can we have a this?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's totally the one to go." So this is a lot of work to get done. I really appreciate it. He was super, super nice.
Wow,
and then I had minimal interaction with him.
That's awesome.
But
that's the best kind of boss.
Yeah, it was good. But I've sometimes had lots of interaction with other directors. But he was very simple.
That's awesome. That's actually unbelievable to me that you're kind of immortalized realistically from that shot. It's forever there.
Well, there's a lot of. I mean, I know a lot of people that have got a lot of shots that you see them in. You can look at Fifth Element, and there's people that are in the background. They were just shot against green screen because they didn't have actors, and they just put them in wardrobe and had them standing there. And there's lots of stuff scattered everywhere. On a lot of different things. We worked on some things I can't even say because I'll get in trouble.
Damn it. So close.
Yeah.
You said you worked on something with David Fincher? No, am I mistaken?
Hang on, let me bring my exposure down a bit. There we go. David Fincher did a bunch of commercials.
I'm a big fan. That's why I'm curious to know a little bit more about that.
Yeah. I was the upstairs was where the visual effects supervisor would sit, and I was here. It was Les Ecker on my left, Fred Raimondi, and then there was Greg Teagarden and Eric Barba in the other room. So the directors and would always come upstairs, and they'd do rounds, but a lot of the times they'd come upstairs just to get away from everything and just look at all the shots. So you'd all see them around. It was always like directly below was the kitchen. So sometimes you'd always bounce ideas of each other. So if David was in with Eric, so David always worked with Eric Barba all the time.
Yeah.
Eric did a great job on all the stuff that he did, and hats off to him. But sometimes I just get, they would say, "Hey, Chris, come and look at this." And then they would look at something and I'd say, "Oh, what about that?" And they're like, "Oh, good point." So I was good at picking things out from things that other people might not see. And so then many times David was around, and I remember when we worked on the Trent Reznor spot, we did the whole we came up with the idea of the whole pushpin thing with the face, and we worked that in. And then with the Benjamin Buttons test, that was next door, and Finch was very grumpy during that time, but he always liked to play football, so we'd always have him a PlayStation nearby to play.
Do you remember what he played? Did he play PES?
That test, the Benjamin Buttons test was done in Lightwave, and then they had a lot of hassle moving it to a different platform for the.
Thanks to anyone that made it all the way to the end. Next week is part 2, which, believe it or not, I think is even better than part 1. We talk about Chris's time in Kenya, and wow, he's had quite a crazy life. So I'm really looking forward to uploading that. So same time next week, part 2 of this podcast. Oh, that's not football.
So so hang on. What was the Paul Forrester, I believe, was the director, and I was doing a commercial for him, and the commercial was with God, what's his name?
No worries.
No, it was the hip hop guy.
LL Cool J.
Yes,
I've seen your work on that.
And so Paul was Paul Hunter. Paul Hunter was a young director who really liked David Fincher. And so I remember when Paul was sitting, we were looking at previs and we're looking at timings of stuff like that. And then David went past and went, "Was that David Fincher?" I went, "Yeah. Hey, David." And he came in and said, "Hey, look at this is what we're working on." And I remember at the time, Paul was like this. And then he was like, "Oh, hi. Yeah. Hey, like this." So it was very cool back then. So it was very relaxed. I have no idea if David would remember me as that Scottish guy, but not maybe anything particular.
You should have done your Worms Angry Scott voice or Soul Man.
Yeah, exactly. They're still using that.
He would have known that. Surely he's played Worms or heard of it.
No. He not a video game plays. He likes his American football. That's it.
Wow, fair enough. Believe it or not, we've gone over an hour and 15. There was so much I still want to talk to you about. Why you moved to... I don't know how much time you have, so I just want to make sure.
On you go. I've got time.